Hello, my friends. Our topic is Vesta. The asteroid Vesta, it's one of the largest asteroids in that main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. I have a lot to say. This is going to be a series of videos on Vesta. We're going to explore a lot of details. We're going to go through this controlled research study that we've done. We're going to see what Vesta does in the charts of different people. A lot of material to cover, and I'm going to start straight away with telling you what Vesta means according to our very latest research, and this includes some updates to our understanding. I'll explain all this, but let me just straight away. What does Vesta do? Burning, eradicating, destroying, or avoiding and protecting oneself from all that is infected, distorted, and impure in our personal lives, both physically and psychologically. So, from these words, you're already getting the impression that Vesta can be severe. In fact, Vesta can even kill. It can also heal by removing impurities and any hate, ugliness, or imperfection. So, Vesta is like a disinfectant. If you want one word for Vesta, it could be disinfectant. Although disinfectant isn't complete, you might need a second word. You could say disinfectant or prophylactic. Okay, kind of like medical terms, but that's what it is. Vesta is sensitive to the fact that there are impurities of many kinds. There are germs, there are viruses. Well, a lot of bacteria, in fact, most bacteria are helpful, but there are those bacteria that are destructive. And that says a lot right there, that most bacteria are beneficial. Most things in life are beneficial. If they weren't, life wouldn't work at all. So life is essentially working, but there are these periodic things that happen that are dysfunctional, that are destructive, that give us disease, that give us heartache, that give us violence, that give us ugliness. All of these things can be called misalignments from the point of view of Vesta. And this is something I emphasize a lot in astrology, is each planet, each asteroid, each zodiac sign, everything in astrology has a purpose and a function, and it has a way of understanding life. It has a vocabulary, a language, a point of view that is its reality. And there are these simultaneous realities that are all true. So when I'm speaking the language of Vesta, it has a certain framework, a certain perspective. It inclines to a certain belief system that could even to some extent contradict or be incompatible, maybe not contradict, but feel incompatible with the function of another planet. That's the nature of life. It's complex, it's multi-layered. So as we dive into particular planets, we dive into a particular point of view. And you can get your mind into the modality of that process and appreciate it for what it is. It may not be my process, may not be your process, may not one of our most fundamental and primary ones, but it is a part of life. What I find really fascinating, rather extraordinary, is that the planets are givens. They are there. And whatever they're doing is some kind of primal force of nature. And that there is a primal force of nature that would know that there would be impurities, imperfections, dysfunctions, and that there's this primal force, this given, this celestial body, which is in some mysterious way connected to this process of detecting these impurities, these dysfunctions, these ugly things, and saying, we got to get rid of it. And there's two there's two techniques, you might say, two methods that Vesta uses. It says, we're going to get rid of it. We'll destroy it. We'll kill these germs. We will get rid of these ugliness. We'll just cut it out. And ugliness takes many forms. In various ways, Vesta is like a knife. It just goes in, cuts it away. But Vesta has another strategy. Its other strategy is to isolate itself, to seal itself. So I'm making this video, what is today, July 29, 2023, in the early hours of the morning where I live here on the east coast of the US. And so I'm making this in 2023. Well, the past few years we've had a global epidemic. People are wearing masks, protecting themselves, hiding themselves, creating a barrier, a prophylactic, a way to prevent something from entering your system. That's Vesta's second method, its second strategy for dealing with infection, disease, and ugliness. Now, in the case of ugliness or distortions from a properly aligned way, so Vesta has a value system. There is a properly aligned way. And there are misalignments. So in the case of ugliness, it doesn't do any good to just hide yourself from the ugliness. Whoop, it's still there. So in the case of ugliness, Vesta has one strategy. Let's remove it. In the case of a disease, say a harmful bacteria or virus, well, of course, you got two choices. Get rid of it, or if you don't know how to get rid of it, or you can't get rid of it effectively without destroying other things, there's problems with getting rid of it, then you can protect yourself from it. So here we really see the importance of this idea in vibrational astrology, that everything is a force, it's a function, it has a purpose, it has a goal. And this is one of the radically different things about vibrational astrology and most other forms of astrology. Because in most of the forms of astrology, what you have is an as above, so below correspondence. There's something going on in the sky, so therefore you're this way. Something in the sky is aggressive, you're aggressive. Something in the sky is lovely and sweet, then you're lovely and sweet. Some kind of mirroring going on of the characteristics, of the qualities. In vibrational astrology, we are proposing that's not what's going on. What's going on is that there's a force, a direction, a purpose, and then the characteristics and everything are born out of that. Even in the modern archetypal approach to astrology, it's still an as above, so below. It's just the as above, so below is based not on external properties, what you appear to be or how you're behaving. They're based more on a psychological story, a psychological phenomenon with many different sides to it. And that's, I think, closer to the idea in vibrational astrology. I think vibrational astrology takes it one step further, where it's just a simple force. It's not complex. It's not a complicated story with all these different facets to it, like a myth is. The planet just does one simple, direct thing. Now, why do we have this theory? I'm going over this, even though this is fundamental to vibrational astrology, not just the asteroid Vesta. I'm going over it with Vesta because in the case of Vesta, if we use an as above, so below way of looking at astrology, we're not able, at least so far, I'm not able, and the other people in the research group who work on these ideas, we're not able to make as good an argument for what Vesta does. Because we're seeing a consistency in this theme, but we are getting some people protecting themselves, some people attacking that germ, that virus, that ugliness, and some people protecting themselves from it. So the goal is the same, the strategy is different, and that's Vesta's interest. Vesta is about this force. I'll read it again: to burn, eradicate, destroy or avoid and protect oneself from all this infection and distortion. How nature was built with these distortions. We have disease. From Vesta's point of view, that's a dysfunction. That's something to get rid of. Vesta has a clear value system. You're aligned, some things are misaligned. Take the misalignments, fix them. So that's what Vesta does. Okay. So let me put this also into perspective about the fact that that Vesta is an asteroid in that main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. What the research is showing is that every asteroid in that main asteroid belt connects the inner planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, with the outer planets, particularly Jupiter and Saturn. And really, it's more like Venus, Mars in general, connects Venus, Mars with Mars, Jupiter. But in a general broad sense. And that broad sense is this. Venus and Mars feel like they are you. When Mars is activated, you want to do something. You want to go somewhere. You want to accomplish something. If you don't accomplish it, you feel like life's not going your way. It's not like you're channeling something, like it's just coming through you. You have to do it. So if you're an athlete and you're trying to, kick the football, or here in America we call it soccer, kick the soccer ball or shoot the basketball, you don't sit there and say, okay, well, God is working through me. I'll just, let it flow. And to some extent, you do get in the zone. You do get in a flow, but there's also this personal intent. You have to make up your mind. It has to come through you. You have to become that force, which is natural to it. Inner planets are you. Jupiter and Saturn operate at a more social, more collective level. So Jupiter is how you make things big, and we make things big together. Saturn is this force to get down to what is essential. And the asteroids are looking at Jupiter and Saturn as the social context, the ethical context, what's important context, a more objective or social or collective level, an ethical level, how that intrudes on our personal life, how it tries to make sense of it. So Ceres is the big boy or big girl out there. She's the big girl. She's by far the largest of the asteroids and more like a planet than any other one. And Ceres is about the whole philosophy and social context of how do we meet our personal needs? How do we get food? How do we have sex and make babies? How do we set up social systems? What's proper? What's ethical? The whole conceptual framework, the whole way of viewing these things. So we don't just, humans are less inclined to just act instinctively, just by impulse. So these asteroids work more strongly for people than they do for animals, in the sense that people interface their personal lives and make decisions. How do we grow our own food? Should we be organic? Should we use the development of agriculture, which Ceres is involved with, is how we work together to produce food, or instead of being more self-sustaining and more of a subsistence level. All these decisions about how we do things. How do we make babies? Do you have to be married, etc.? These are issues that people in our research struggle with, deal with, write about, talk about. And then the other asteroids are more specific. They pick on some specific thing. Pallas is, how do children become adults? Who's going to guide them? Who's going to be there? And who is going to help that child bring their individual talents into the world? How is that interface made? How do we find a place for that individual talent? And what Pallas does is it puts equal emphasis on the social context and the individual. How do we bring them together? And Vesta, as I said, deals with this other issue that in our immediate biological lives, that's the one side, our biology, our instincts, our passions, our need for fundamentals, food and sex are two of the big ones that come up with asteroids. But Vesta is not so interested in food and sex. It's more interested in misalignment, disease, imperfections, and dealing with the imperfections that exist at our fundamental level, like disease, like distortions of different kinds, like hatred or other things that are preventing us from being properly aligned and acknowledging what the pure and good essence in our personal lives is. And so Vesta disinfects us when there is trauma. If a person has had a lot of traumatic experiences or even one very intense traumatic experience, especially when growing up, Vesta can retaliate. Like if a child is abused by the parent, what might Vesta do? Eliminate it. We're going to see some ugly things with Vesta. There are people who've killed family members. Really ugly things that we don't like to talk about or think about. But with Vesta, we're going to see people with strong Vesta will do things like this. They will eliminate and eradicate what they perceive as evil. Then we'll see two major military leaders. When I get into this, you'll see a certain kind of military leader who is eradicating what they see as impure, not correct, in the enemy, what they perceive as their enemy. Okay, I'm at 17 minutes. I've only, maybe I'm talking too much, but I really wanted to drill in these ideas. This will move faster. I just want to get these basics down because they're really important. Okay, so this is what Vesta looks like. There was a space probe, basically an unmanned rocket, a rocket that just goes up there. It's got some cameras and other things for doing research and, doing investigations. It was called Dawn. It traveled to Vesta in 2011, and then it took off and went on to Ceres. At the time, Vesta was its first target, and then after it finished with Vesta, it went on to Ceres. And it, among other things, what this unmanned vehicle was able to do, this space probe or whatever you want to call it, was to get some really cool pictures and get a better idea of what these things look at. And what these cameras do is they take many, many shots from different angles and little parts, and then they, with computer software, they make a composite to see what the whole thing looks like. And here's an image of it. There it is. And it's almost round. Anyway, there it is. Got these little cratery things on it. So this is one of the better images that we've gotten, between 2011 and 2015. Well, the Vesta was around 2011. So that's what it looks like. Interesting. And I've shown this in the video on Pallas. I recently, last week, made the video on Pallas. And you'll see that Pallas and Vesta are similar. Pallas is a little more round. It's not obvious here, but in the video on Pallas, I show these little dimples, pretty evenly spread. And there's Vesta. It's actually the same image from a different angle, tilted. Look how big Ceres is and how round it is. So Ceres is the big one. These are the next two, Pallas and Vesta, in terms of size. Now, since all of these objects are in the main asteroid belt, there's little else that they compete on. If you look at centaurs that travel between the orbits of planets, I'm going to talk more. I've already made one video about what makes an asteroid important. We've got some ideas about it. It's not just size. But all of these objects are similar in that they have a similar place in the sky, and size becomes one of the distinguishing factors for asteroids of the same type. In this case, we're looking at main asteroid, asteroids in the main asteroid belt. These are the next two, and not far behind is Hygeia. So Hygeia is the next asteroid that I'm going to talk about. And then they start getting smaller. And interesting, Interamnia and Europa and Davida are, you might say, next in size and so on. And then, starts getting much, much smaller. But it does appear that at least up to the ones on the left side, these all appear to be important. We have good research showing that Juno is important, even though it's much smaller than these. And of course, Juno is considered one of the 4 major asteroids because it was one of the first 4 discovered. I don't know if discovery date should be a criterion for what we might want to look at. You have to remember there are over 500,000 asteroids in the solar system. Are we going to look at any of them? So the larger ones in the main asteroid belt do appear to be very important. In fact, more than appear, this evidence-based research is giving very strong confidence that they are in fact important. They have an effect on our lives. Now, next thing I want to mention, and then I'm going to get into the research, and specifically what we see, and that supports everything that I've told you, is I want to give you a little background to the research. It started around 2019, and then in 2020, a lecture was given at the Vibrational Astrology Conference about it, and now 3 years later, I've gone back over that research and done a ton more. Put another, I don't know how many dozens of hours into this. I got really carried away, spending more hours than I thought of this because it was fascinating. One thing led to another, led to another, led to another, and it's going to be fun to share this with you. Now, another thing about this new research that I'm doing, that I just did over these past few weeks in July 2023, is that we now have a larger database of famous people than we had in 2020. And with this larger database, much larger, it's almost twice as big, new people will show up because we're doing this research we call extreme case sampling. The people with a very conspicuous Vesta, very conspicuous Vesta in their chart. So we're going to bring in some new people who have an extremely strong Vesta. And what we did is we just look at people with Sun conjunct Vesta. That's all. And when you have tens of thousands of charts, you're going to end up with people who have Sun conjunct Vesta with an orb of just a few minutes. Like Sun will be conjunct Vesta with a 1 minute orb. A 2-minute orb. And something amazing happens when you have an orb that small. Let me get a little drink of water here. Something happens when the orb is that small is that the object, this could be true with anything. It could be like Sun conjunct Jupiter or Mars conjunct Saturn, anything. When the orb is tiny, then in our system of vibrational astrology, what that means is that those planets remain conjunct together in all these higher vibrations. So orbs are tremendously important. I mean, like big time important. And when that orb gets down below like 5 minutes, the quality of that conjunction starts to pervade your life. It starts to pervade your life. Even though you're extracting only one thing out of the astrology chart, it becomes really strong. Once the orb gets out to half a degree, it does not pervade your life, doesn't saturate your life as much, according to vibrational astrology. Maybe you're not a total believer in vibrational astrology. I'm not a total believer in anything in astrology, but it's what I have the greatest confidence in by far. So when you go into research, you go in with some ideas, with your it's not totally exploratory. So we're expecting these people to have Vesta in their lives. Maybe it's not the single most important thing, but it should be evident. And if it's not evident, then our idea of Vesta is wrong. So there are these tricks, these incredibly cool new research tools. As I've mentioned many times, this is a research tool used in genetics very successfully. They found out genes that are responsible for extreme obesity and other issues. Really very totally cool. And so this research is like a game. It's just like a game. And the rules of the game are as follows. We take these super Vesta people with Sun conjunct Vesta, with just 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, I think goes up to 4 minutes among these top people that we looked at. And we see if we can make sense of it. That's the name of the game. You read their biographies. I didn't do it in this research, but then we also look at transits and progressions involving that Sun Vesta conjunction. And then those Vesta themes should become very conspicuous at those times. So we have different things we can do here. But in this research, I'm just saying, here's a Sun Vesta person. Is that theme clear and obvious? And this definition of what Vesta does that I just gave you is quite a bit modified from the one we had in 2020. It's not completely different, but we've gotten it down more clearly, more specifically, what Vesta does. So I think I have it on the next slide. Yeah, this is where I think on these next few slides, I start talking about the difference between our understanding of Vesta that we've gotten in the new research and how that modifies what we had understood before. What we understood before was not completely wrong. It was on the right track. But as we do the research, it gets more specific. It's clearer and clearer exactly what something does. And in this research, we find out more precisely what Vesta does. So the findings, what did we find? Well, I've already given you the interpretation of Vesta. That's the final conclusion. But what we will see in the details of this research is that when we play this game of trying to understand what these super Vesta people have in common, it does require us to think of Vesta as a force, as explained, and not a set of characteristics. And I've already covered this. By looking at Vesta as a force to achieve something, it fits the data better. We're going to go through these top people. There are 7 of them. So we're going to look at these 7 people and how we see Vesta working in their lives. And you're going to see that using this interpretation of Vesta enables us to fit what the people are like. And one of the things in this research method, it's a game. It's like if you play baseball, you get 3 strikes, you're out. You don't get 4 strikes, And then this game of this research is that you cannot skip any of these 7 people. They're the big 7. It's data driven. We don't get to say, oh, I don't like that, and ignore it. And so when you face all 7, this fits. You may come up with something even better. Let us know. That will help improve our understanding even more. So when you look at these 7 people, you analyze their charts, see what you come up with, see if this fits, because that's the name of the game. Anybody can join in and say, you know what, this fits these 7 people better. What you can't do in this game is say, oh, but look at the chart of my friend and my chart of my client and da-da-da, it worked for them. You cannot use that to give you a way to ignore the results of the research. You do that to see if it improves the results. They both have to work. What you see in the database has to work, and when you apply it with your clients and your famous people or anything you're looking at, they should agree, because if Vesta means something, they should agree. But you can't use one and say, okay, what works for me this way, even though the research said something different. That's not an evidence-based system. They have to agree. So that's the name of the game. It's a game I play. I like it. And I find that it does give us good results, as it does in every other academic field. Now, here's the difference between what we found in the new research and what we thought before. The previous findings were mostly confirmed, but some modification to the understanding. In the lecture at the 2020 VA conference, it was stated, there was a slide, and I'm going to quote from it. Vesta protects a sacred space. Vesta brings a sense of the sacred, something so pure, precious, and delicate that it is very easily contaminated. That fit pretty well with the charts that we were looking at. And it's consistent with what astrologers are saying about Vesta, which is very closely tied to the myth of Vesta. These Vestal virgins, there are these, it's very ritualistic and, like a controlled sacred space. You have this flame, this protection. So you get this feeling of Vesta as this beautiful, controlled, kind of elegant protection of a quiet, beautiful, sacred space. It's pretty close, but what the new research is showing is, I'll read it from the slide, the new research emphasizes that Vesta is less sedate, less devotional, and it is more simply concerned about being in an environment free from debilitating toxicity. And that toxicity can be to the physical or the emotional well-being. So you'll see some of these Vesta people going after the more physical, some more emotional levels. What Vesta does is it sees impurities, gets rid of it, or protects itself from it. It's that simple. It's not so much about sacred and protecting. I mean, I kind of wish it was. I really love that mythological feel. That has actually maybe Vesta in 7 vibration. Now that's another research project. It would be interesting to do Sun conjunct Vesta tightest in 7 vibration. Ooh, that would be totally cool. Because 7 vibration is quiet and controlled. And maybe there it does protect the sacred space. Because the vibration combined with the planet gives different things come out. But Vesta in the natal chart is not doing that. That's what we're going to see. The results are. And that Vesta sometimes goes to extremes of purification to the point of being irrational, and it becomes destructive, ironically. Vesta gets in its head, so to speak. I mean, it gets this passion, like, I've got to destroy this. It's so bad. I've got to destroy it. And it just goes, goes like off balance. It just starts destroying, killing, and making things even worse. So, its goal is to get rid of ugliness, but it can create its own ugliness, especially when there's trauma, which causes dysfunction, etc. The intent of anything in astrology is good. We need to do something about disease. I mean, billions of dollars are being spent on research and applications and medical centers and hospitals, a big part of life. They do other things as well, hospitals, but it is a big part of life, and that's what Vesta is engaged in. So people with very strong Vesta who have experienced extreme trauma in childhood can engage in very malicious behavior, right? There's malicious behavior out there. There's bad things happening, and there's reasons for it. And Vesta gets into it for several reasons. Okay, now I'm going to stop here. We're at 34 minutes. In the next video in this slide is going to be this one. I'm going to show you who the people are. I'm going to start looking at the charts. I know it took me 34 minutes to just put out these basics. Maybe I've been a little bit repetitive or whatever, but I wanted to set this solid so it's clear. Now let's look at them. We'll go through them. And then after we go through this, I'm going to show you some other ways that I've applied what we've come up with to different situations. And oh my God, it's so totally cool. It really, really works. That's why it took me so long to finally come out with these videos. I'm several days behind my typical schedule for releasing, um, because this research just went on and on and on and on as I kept finding more and more fascinating things and sorting out what's happening. Okay, next video, we're going to go through these in order. I'll explain what all this yellow and green is in the beginning of the next video in this series. Thank you very much, my friends, for being members. Oh my God, I'm so grateful for that. And by the way, I should remember to plug things a little bit more. It's not really plugging, but to share things with you. I've mentioned that this original research was presented at the Vibrational Astrology in 2020. If you want to keep up with the latest things that are happening, in addition to these videos, which is an excellent way to do it, if you come to the conference, you meet the people, you become part of the community, and enter this whole world of what's going on. So it's not all, virtual. And through videos and stuff, it's just great to be actually alive with the people doing this stuff, meeting and discussing. It's just fabulous. Okay, so there's a vibrational astrology in the first week of March every year, and it's in Gainesville, Florida. There is an airport in Gainesville, not a big one, but you can get connections to it. Okay, next video in the series, the second video in the series, let's start looking at these charts. Thank you again. God bless. Namaste.